Alarms ring out through the submarine as the crew rush to their emergency stations. Unable to save the vessel, they're ordered to abandon ship, forcing them to choose between a raging fire and the frigid waters of the Barents Sea. In the 1970s, the Soviet Navy was a formidable force, and it wanted to push the limits of what was possible with submarine technology. The Soviets' Project 685 was developing a nuclear-powered attack submarine called K-278, which was known by NATO as the Mike-class SSN. Soviet government ordered their navy to design the K-278 submarine, and the design was completed in 1974. In April 1978, production started and the keel was laid down at the shipyard in Severodvinsk. K-278 had an overall length of 118 meters with a beam of 11 meters. This prototype had a double hull to allow for a greater dive depth than any of its predecessors. The inner pressure hull was titanium with a total of 7 compartments. The second and third compartments were reinforced to serve as a safe area if the crew encountered any problems. The sub achieved speeds of 14 knots when submerged and a maximum of 30 knots on the surface using nuclear propulsion with 2 steam turbines. The nuclear reactor in K-278 was the same type used in 4 other types of Soviet submarines. A single OK-650B3 pressurized water reactor using enriched uranium-235 for fuel, producing 190 megawatts of power. The reactor could be shut down or scrammed in an emergency situation by inserting control rods into the reactor, stopping the nuclear reaction almost instantly. The sub was armed with anti-submarine missiles and 6 torpedo tubes. It had many automated systems, which meant it could operate with a 64-person crew of 30 officers, 22 warrant officers, and 12 petty officers and seamen. It also had an MGK-500 SCAT, or shark gill sonar system, which is low-frequency sonar capable of detecting stealth-capable submarines and still used in modern vessels. The sub had a design depth of 1,250 meters, an operating depth of 1,000 meters, and a crush depth of 1,500 meters. On the 3rd of June 1983, the Soviet Navy launches K-278 and the sub goes into commission 6 months later. The next year, it dives to 1,020 meters, which is a new high water mark for the time. 5 years after its first deep dive, K-278 is renamed Komsomolets, meaning a member of the Komsomol, which is the youth branch of the Soviet Union's Communist Party. On the 7th of April 1989, Komsomolets is submerged at a depth of 330 meters, around 100 nautical miles off Norway on its 3rd operational patrol. 39 days into its patrol in the Barents Sea, a malfunction in part of the ballast system triggers a break in the air system. A burst of air causes oil to leak in one of the aft compartments and oil sprays onto a running turbine. Friction from the turbine heats the oil, which ignites into a burst of flames, causing a short circuit in the electrics. The short circuit starts a fire in the engineering and 7th compartment. The fire spreads quickly to the 6th compartment, killing an officer. It spreads through the cable penetrations between the bulkheads and through the electrical system, causing multiple failures. As the fire spreads, it burns through the control system cables and the sub loses its main propulsion. The fire forces an emergency scram and the nuclear reactor automatically shuts down. The crew of Komsomolets are trapped inside a burning submarine 300 meters below the waterline. The crew try to fight the fire, but 11 minutes after it starts, the commanding officer realizes it's a losing battle and orders an emergency ballast blow. Komsomolets surfaces in the frigid Norwegian waters. The fire has taken hold in the aft compartments and attempts to control it have failed, and so the crew close the watertight doors in an attempt to contain the fire. Even though they're now on the surface, the threat from the fire increases. The crew make an SOS call to Soviet Navy headquarters. The higher-ups debate for some time whether they should even launch a rescue effort, even though the crew on board the sub are in danger and fighting for their lives. Senior officers in the Soviet Navy eventually dispatch vessels to Komsomolets position, but the nearest base is more than a 12-hour sail away. The crew on board continue to fight the fire, which threatens the entire sub, but some men in the fire team pass out from inhaling carbon monoxide, and 2 of the emergency team die despite being recovered to the deck. Commanding Officer Vannon realizes that it's impossible to extinguish the flames, so he decides to allow the fire to burn itself out. Heat from the fire causes multiple seals in the hull to fail, allowing water to flood into the 6th and 7th compartments. Because the sub is at the surface, which exposes the upper hull to the air, there's no water to cool the outer hull, and the extreme heat causes the rubber coating to peel off. Most of the crew are instructed to abandon ship. They deploy an inflatable raft with a capacity of 25 men, but about 50 crewmen try to clamber aboard. The men who can't board the life raft fall into the Barents Sea, where the temperature is just above freezing at 2 degrees Celsius. 5 crew, including the commanding officer, remain on board to search for men trapped in the burning vessel. The compressed air system on board continues to feed the fire, allowing it to spread throughout the boat. After a few hours, water leaking through the burned out seals causes the boat to lose buoyancy, and it slips below the surface with the 5 men still on board. Komsomolets sinks in 1,700 meters of water through the icy darkness, heading to the bottom of the Barents Sea. In a last-ditch attempt, the 5 men trapped inside scramble into the escape capsule and try to eject, but the rescue chamber won't detach. The submarine survives past its estimated crush depth, with the 5 men still alive, and settles on the bottom. With the sub level on the sand, the escape pod releases, with a burst of pressure that expels 2 men into the icy depths. By the time it reaches the surface, 2 more men are dead from smoke inhalation. The last man manages to climb out of the escape vessel before the rough seas overwhelm it, and it sinks with the 2 sailors' bodies. Rescue aircraft eventually arrive and fly over the last known location of the stricken Komsomolets. They drop rafts to the men in the water. 81 minutes after Komsomolets slips below the surface, the first vessel, a floating factory ship named Alexei Klobostov, arrives on the scene. It pulls 25 survivors from the sea and recovers 5 bodies. A second fishing vessel, the Omar, is next on the scene to assist with the recovery efforts. A total of 29 men are pulled from the sea by the time the rescue is complete, but 2 of them die from shock. In the end, 42 men lose their lives. 4 die directly from the fire, explosions, or smoke inhalation. All the other sailors die from drowning or hypothermia while they wait for rescue. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, the international community was concerned about the nuclear warheads on board the sub, and so the Soviets set out to find the wreck. In April 1989, they launched the research vessel Akademik Mstislav Keldysh, and 2 months later, it located the wreck using its deep-sea submersibles. The Soviets declared that the site was safe, and there was no nuclear leaks. 5 years later, a search team found that plutonium was leaking from one of the 2 nuclear warheads in compartment 1. In 1996, the search vessel Keldysh was deployed once again to seal fractures in the hull of the wreck and contain the radiation. Between 1989 and 1998, the Russians visited the wreck site several times to secure the reactor and accused unspecified foreign agents of visiting the wreck to gather information. The wreckage of Komsomolets remains on the bottom of the Barents Sea. The site is expected to stay safe and sealed until 2025. If you enjoyed this video, you might like to watch this video about another submarine incident.